In July 1940, it looked like Britain's war would be over before it had even begun. France had lasted 6 weeks. Few thought Britain could possibly last longer. Yet over the next 4 months, just 3,000 fighter pilots were to deliver the nation from the jaws of defeat. Their Battle of Britain was to create an aviation legend, the Supermarine Spitfire. It's been 60 years since young men were last trained to fly it. Until now, we've chosen 4 pilots to compete for the chance to relive Battle of Britain Spitfire training, to see if they have what it took to become one of the few. By July 1940, all the Allies who'd fought alongside the British were gone. As France collapsed, the British army was pulled off the beaches of Dunkirk. But there was no disguising it had been a rout. The government was in turmoil, and there were many who believed the only way to avoid invasion was to sue for peace. All that stood between Britain and certain defeat was 20 miles of the English Channel. But there was one glimmer of hope. Even the all-conquering Germans knew that before they could launch their invasion barges, first they would have to destroy the RAF. This gave Churchill one last chance. He staked everything on the RAF holding out. If Britain could resist the Luftwaffe until winter, there could be no invasion until at least the following spring. That might just be enough time to rebuild the army, or even draw the Americans into the war. But few on either side of the Channel thought the RAF were any kind of match for the fearsome Luftwaffe. Throughout the 30s, the world had watched in horror while the Germans built themselves the most powerful air force in the world.
I think the attitude is slightly gun-ho, then we'll let them come, we'll fix them.
They've decimated Europe, they've flattened Poland, and here they are over this country with their snotty-nosed fighters and their bombers, dropping bombs on everything and sundry, trying to get to London, bombing our airfields, bombing our villages, bombing our towns. You know, what right have they got to do this sort of thing? This Teutonic monster.
As far as I was concerned, I was just a young boy who had every intention of stopping these bastards coming into my mum's backyard. And that literally was what I was fighting for.
For the next 4 months, these pilots were to live in a world of nerves, exhaustion, and death. By Christmas, 1 in 6 of those who flew in the Battle of Britain would be dead. Fighter Command drew its pilots from all sorts of backgrounds, but what united them was not just the ability to fly Spitfires, but to go to war in them. 60 years later, the questions remain as pointed as ever. What did it take to fly a Spitfire in anger, with the fate of the free world resting on your shoulders? And what was the difference between just being a flyer and a fighter pilot? To find out, we've enlisted 4 pilots who reflect the makeup of the wartime RAF. Fighter Command drew its pilots from various sources, but its core was the pre-war regular RAF. So we've recruited a pilot just out of RAF basic training.
My name's John Sweet, I'm 20 and I'm a pilot in the Air Force. I've just finished my elementary flying training, which is 60 hours worth of flying with the RAF.
Then there was the Auxiliary Air Force, recruited from gentlemen's clubs and universities, the social cream, where the right friends and accent could count as much as your flying skills. To represent these pilots, we've brought in a member of Bristol University Air Squadron.
My name's Ben Westerby Brooks. I'm 20 years of age and I have approximately 105 hours total on light aircraft. I started my flying at Bodmin Airfield on an RAF flying scholarship, and then I've recently been flying with Bristol University Air Squadron at Kilburn in Wiltshire.
And finally, there were the enthusiasts, desperate to fly. In the 1930s, the RAF paid for young men to join civilian flying schools on the understanding they would enlist in the event of war. This force was called the Volunteer Reserve, and we've got 2 young private pilots to represent this branch of the service.
My name's David Mallon. I'm 22. I'm from Manchester. As a civilian pilot, I've done the private pilot's licence. I've done 80 hours total time. My ambition is to be an airline pilot.
My name's Christian Baker. I'm 21. At this moment in time, I'm working for myself. I'm doing a lot with exotic cars. I'm about 5 months now, but I've been doing about 5, possibly 6 hours a week. I'm somewhere in the region of 55, 56 hours, and thoroughly enjoying it.
These 4 pilots will be competing for the chance to fly in a plane that has become a legend. However, Britain was lucky to have the Spitfire. When war started, they had been in service with the RAF for barely a year.
I was at RAF St Athens doing my engine course, and a pal of mine and I went for a walk across the airfield one day, and standing in one corner of the airfield were 4 aeroplanes. We'd never seen the likes of this. A big head straight up onto the wing and looked in, and there on the rudder bar it said Supermarine. We knew what they were. We'd heard such a lot of talk about them. We thought, oh my God. And that was the first Spitfire I ever saw, parked on St Athens airfield, brand new, never been let off, you know, nothing on the clock. And it was so beautiful. On the ground, standing still, it looked as if it were doing 400 mile an hour. I was open-mouthed.
It looked right. It looked like a fighter. It was wonderful. It looks a beautiful, beautiful little aeroplane. Oh yeah, I wanted to fly one. I was jolly lucky to do so too.
You're not flying an airplane, you've got wings on your back, and you're just flying. It is a dream.
It's rather like, you know, being a kid and being asked to drive a Bugatti with somebody else paying for the fuel, sort of thing. It was a wonderful thing.
It's the most fastest airplane I have ever flown. I loved it.
There are only a tiny handful of Spitfires still flying today, typically worth over £1 million each, and only flown by highly specialised pilots. So we've teamed up with Carolyn Grace, the one person who can give inexperienced pilots like ours the chance to fly a Spitfire. As well as being the world's leading female Spitfire pilot, she owns the only dual-seater still in operation.
The Grey Spitfire is a very unusual Spitfire. In fact, at the moment it's really quite unique. It is the only remaining operational 2-seat configuration Spitfire from the war. It was a single-seat fighter during the latter part of the war.
The Grey Spitfire is a Mark 9, built in 1944. It flew over 170 combat missions as a single-seat fighter. It was the first Allied plane to shoot down an enemy aircraft on D-Day, and for this reason, still sports its black and white invasion markings.
What saved it from being scrapped, as most of them were after the war, was the fact that it was converted by Supermarine at Southampton as an advanced trainer. It was my late husband Nick's ambition from a very young age to fly a Spitfire, and he knew that he would never be given one to fly, so he acquired one from a museum in 1979 and spent 5 years rebuilding it. He was going to put it back to the single-seat configuration, and I said, no, I'd like a 2-seat configuration, please. And it was a wonderful, exciting moment when he first flew the aeroplane in 1985 with me in the back. And he went on to display the aircraft for another 3 years around the country and was well known. And then in October '88, he was killed coming home in a car accident. Having lost the person, I was determined that our children, Olivia and Richard, aged 4 and 5 then, were not going to lose the actual personality or the achievement of their father. So I knew that the Spitfire was part of the family, and it was going to be an enormous struggle, but I would learn to fly the Spitfire and keep it going in memory of him.
As this plane has 2 sets of controls, our trainee pilots fly for themselves. But it won't just be a quick jaunt around the park. The pilot selected for the full 9 hours will be pushed all the way to full combat manoeuvres via the disciplines of navigation and formation flying. They will be pushing the Spitfire close to its limits. And while nobody will be shooting at them, they will get a glimpse of some of the biggest hazards facing fighter pilots. But even in 1940, not every pilot got to fly a Spitfire. So only the 2 most promising will get the chance to fly it. and just one will then be selected for the 9 hours battle training. Their first challenge, however, will be to convince flight instructor Brendan that they have the right stuff. And like their predecessors, they will have to do it in a Tiger Moth. Our 4 young pilots will begin their journey to become Spitfire pilots here at Headcorn Airfield in Kent, where they will have their piloting skills tested on exactly the plane used by many of their Battle of Britain predecessors, the Tiger Moth. They will be in the hands of flying instructor Brendan O'Brien, who will then make the tough decision which of the 4 pilots will go on to fly the Spitfire.
Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Headcorn Airfield, the first morning's briefing. My name's Brendan O'Brien, and I'm going to be your instructor on the Tiger Moth for the next several days. Now, I think you all know why you're here, but just to recap, OK? You're all going to fly with me on the Tiger Moth over the next few days, yeah? 2 of you then will be selected to go on to fly the Spitfire. Out of those 2, 1 will be selected to do advanced flying training and aerobatics on the Spitfire. At the end of that time, that person will have a very good idea of what it was like to be a young fighter pilot during World War II.
The first to clamber into the cockpit is Christian. The Tiger Moth made an excellent basic training aircraft during the 30s, as it is said to be easy to fly, but hard to fly well.
You really get this feeling, the smell and like the old smell. It's just like being back in 1940s. And the airport here where we're at now is such an old-fashioned airport. You might, if you shut your eyes, you might as well be back in the 1940s.
Fuel on.
Fuel on.
Throttle set.
Throttle set.
Contact.
Contact.
It's sort of always been in the family, really. My granddad flew Spitfires. So I'd go to their house and I'd see pictures of him by aircraft on the walls. So it was always there from a young age. And then as I got older, I got involved with the training corps. And sort of got a little bit more flying there to see what it's like. And the more I found out about it, the more enthused I've been to carry on, really.
I used to read a lot of history books about the First World War and the Second World War, and things like Biggles books and all the old stories about pilots in the sort of the olden times flying, like Tiger Moths, obviously, and Sopwith Camels and things like that. I got really interested in it, and then obviously went on and joined the Air Force later on in life.
Many Battle of Britain pilots earned their wings on Tiger Moths before moving on to advanced trainers, and then Spitfires or Hurricanes.
It's all that an elementary trainer should be, but it was a nice aircraft to fly, aerobatic, and because they had so much lift that they bounced about the sky, so that if you're doing formation flying, it was much harder to keep position in the formation. Overall, I'd give it 8 out of 10, I'd say.
Okay, you have control.
Fire control.
Have a good look round, check that it's all clear.
It's clear.
Jolly good. So just lower the nose, elevate your control speed, power, controls ascent and descent.
Okay.
Good. Off you go from there then.
The Tiger Moth will give Brendan a clear idea of each of our pilots' flying abilities, whilst giving them a vivid first impression of the realities of 1930s RAF fighter pilot training.
Okay, all yours, dear old boy. You can side slip down, yes?
Okay.
Whoa,
Sorry,
shit.
sorry.
No, a little bit more subtly, like that, and you're about to flick into the ground, mate, okay?
Just 10 years before the outbreak of war, the RAF's frontline fighters weren't that different from the Tiger Moth. In 1929, the best the RAF had to offer was the Bristol Bulldog, a lightly armed biplane capable of just 174 miles per hour. But with Germany starting to rearm, it became alarmingly clear this would have to change.
The middle of the 1930s saw a revolution in the design of fighter aircraft. A move away from a biplane that was made of wood and doped fabric to an all-metal monoplane. And the prime reason for that was the need for speed.
In 1930, the Air Ministry rose to the threat, calling for a fighter capable of 250 miles per hour and carrying 4 machine guns. Aircraft designers considered this virtually impossible, and even the pilots had their misgivings.
There was an awful bias against monoplanes. You know, they reckoned without a top wing bolted to a bottom wing, the wings would fall off.
The speed of them was perceived initially by a lot of people as being potentially beyond the control of the ordinary human being, and it was thought that they were so fast that they would only be able to make one quick pass, and then they'd be gone. There were those who believed that the manoeuvrability and flexibility of the biplane was such that it should be maintained for effectively dogfighting purposes.
Christian has survived his first flight in the Tiger Moth and is beginning to see why generations of pilots think so highly of them.
How was your first flight in the Tiger?
I tell you what, absolutely brilliant. It's a different world up there. There's so much better visibility and it's so responsive. And you need so much better coordination with the rudders and they stick on this as you would do. And it's not very forgiving, so you've got to be really in tune with the rudder and the ailerons. But it's absolutely brilliant.
Now he's set the standard, it's up to the others to impress Brendan.
Okay, you have control.
I have control.
Lower your nose.
Lower the nose.
Accelerate.
Throttle.
Yep. Don't rush. And rolling. Keep it going, keep it going. Relax on the runners. That was fine. You'd have been absolutely perfect there.
Not back pressure.
Just relax. Do the same thing without all the aggression and the aggressive pulling it. On you go, pull and roll. That's it. Keep going, keep going. And roll now. That's the boy. Much better. Good feet too. Well done. Go. Don't stop, you cow. Good. Not too hard, bit too hard.
Okay.
That was good, but just a bit hard and aggressive. Be smooth.
Okay.
Make love to the sky, do not shag it.
It was really good. I mean, it flies so much different to the aircraft that I've been used to flying, but it's amazing. It's very, very sensitive on the controls, especially on the sort of elevator, especially. But it's amazing with the wind in your face compared to sort of a closed cockpit. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
The whole experience was really good. I didn't think I fly particularly well. I struggled to get the attitude right, so I was constantly chasing things, but as an experience it was excellent. It was really, really good.
My landing was a bit heavy, certainly. The turns to start off with, I was wobbling all over the place, but later on I started to get the hang of it and started to get it turning coordinated turns, which was looked a lot better and felt right.
They may have been fun to fly, but it was clear the next air war would not be decided with biplanes. But monoplanes wouldn't work without much more power. The breakthrough came when Rolls-Royce created an engineering masterpiece, the Merlin. This 24-litre beast created over 1,000 horsepower and opened up exciting new possibilities for aircraft designers.
When the Air Ministry put out a specification for a new low-wing monoplane fighter, the first person to take it up was Sidney Cam, the chief designer for Hawkers. Cam had produced most of the most successful aircraft then in service in the RAF, both light bombers and fighters. And what he did was to take the basic design of the Hawker Fury and turn it into a monoplane. And the result of this, known first of all as the Fury monoplane, became the Hurricane. And the Hurricane was, in a sense, a halfway house. The wings were metal, the forward fuselage was metal, but from the middle of the cockpit back, it was actually constructed on wooden slats covered in fabric again.
The Hurricane's hybrid approach allowed it to break the magical 300 miles per hour barrier and to carry not just 4 machine guns, but 8. At last, the RAF hoped it had a plane capable of facing the German menace.
As a bomber destroyer, it was very effective indeed. It was easy to fly, and it could operate from quite rough airstrips.
At the time, in late 1935, it was the fastest thing in the sky. And for about 9 months, it captured the imagination of every English schoolboy who saw these things zipping about overhead until, unfortunately for this quite attractive but rather plain country girl, along came a real sophisticated catwalking glamour puss from the unlikely stable of a small company based in Southampton that had specialised in seaplanes.
This company was Supermarine, who had made their name building the Schneider Trophy race planes in the 20s and early 30s. This was a straight test of speed, and Supermarine had won the competition 3 times in a row, so claiming the trophy outright for Britain. These planes were the creation of their chief designer, Reginald Mitchell, who now turned his attention to fighters.
He set about things in a completely different way from Cam. He decided that rather than developing an aircraft that was already in existence, he had to take a clean sheet and design something from scratch, which was quite unlike anything that had gone before. And the result was probably the most famous aircraft in British history.
The Spitfire arrived in the nick of time, mesmerising everyone who laid eyes on it. In 1942, a film was released making Mitchell nearly as famous as his plane.
See how they wheel and bank and glide? And all in one. Wings, body, tail, all in one. But you wait. Someday, I'm going to build a plane just like a bird.
Why, it is like a bird. What a strange-looking machine.
The Spitfire is remarkable in its combination of speed and manoeuvrability. It was all metal, low wing, a monocoque design, which meant that it was the structure itself that gave the aircraft strength. It was made as small as possible and was designed for speed above all else. His masterpiece was the wing, and the wing of this machine was based on an elliptical shape, which was known at the time to be the one shape which produced the lowest induced drag of any other wing shape at subsonic speeds.
The Spitfire first flew in 1936, but its designer never saw the true impact of his creation. Mitchell was battling cancer, but refused to let this interfere with his work. This dedication took its toll, and in June 1937, he died, aged 42. However, he did live long enough to see the government order 300 Spitfires. His work hadn't been in vain.
Congratulations, Mrs. Mitchell. Will you thank your husband and tell him that he's given England something that she badly needs?
The name was very nearly Shrew. The name was changed from Supermarine Shrew to Supermarine Spitfire. And the person responsible for that was the head of Vickers at the time, a man called Maclean, who said that his daughter Anne was a little Spitfire, and it was decided to name this aircraft after her. A rather bad-tempered woman, although in the opinion of the pilots she's always been a real lady. Mitchell had only one comment: that's just the sort of bloody silly name they would give it, isn't it?
At Headcorn, the boys are getting one last chance to impress Brendan on the Tiger Moth. After 3 days of trials in the Tiger Moth, Brendan has the task of deciding which of our 4 young pilots will be going on to fly Mitchell's revolutionary creation.
After 3 days of really hard flying, it's decision time to decide who is going to go forward to fly the Spitfire. There was clearly at the end, although for the first couple of days it was frankly anybody's, but there was one who was clearly ahead, and that was John. And the reason for that, it did show through, was his professional Air Force training and a great deal of aptitude as well. Ben flew extremely well. Again, with an Air Force training, very competent, a very nice pair of hands, as we say in the business, and I would certainly want him as one of my wingmen. Christian, a great character and sport, full of enthusiasm, and I think considering he was the one with the least number of hours, he did extremely well. Dave, who hasn't actually been doing a lot of regular flying lately, I have to say was the one that improved the most in the shortest period of time. Gentlemen, the moment of truth. Two going forward for the Spitfire flying are John and Dave. Well done, both of you.
Thank you very much.
John, your professional training as an Air Force pilot obviously showed through, as well as a great deal of aptitude. Dave, you actually made the greatest over the period of time. A great job, well done. Thank you all very much, and well done.
I don't have a chance of doing that kind of stuff, and congratulations.
Cheers, mate.
This is Officers' Mess, Drem, East Lothian, 21st of June, 1940. Dear Mum and Dad, it's rather nice to belong to a Spitfire squadron because they are fairly few and far between, and the Spitfire is still the fastest single-engine fighter, I believe. I've still to make my maiden voyage, but hope to do that tomorrow. Up to now, I've flown a Tiger Moth and a Magister around the countryside just to get an idea of the lie of the land. More soon. Love as always, Nigel.
For John Sweet and Dave Mallon, it's time to move to Duxford, one of the key Battle of Britain airfields. Today, it's home to the Imperial War Museum's collection of historic aircraft, as well as Carolyn Grace's two-seater Spitfire. As war broke out in 1939, it was clear Mitchell's work hadn't come a day too soon. The salad days of pre-war flying were over. Things were about to get serious.
This week, having flown the Tiger Moth last week, you're going to learn to fly a Spitfire. By Wednesday, we will have assessed both of your abilities as fighter pilots. We will choose one of you who will then go on to do a full 9 hours in the Spitfire of combat training, and at the end of that you will have about the same amount of hours that a number of the Battle of Britain pilots had when they indeed went to combat.
We flew Spitfires straight from biplanes. None of us had ever flown low-wing monoplanes before, and suddenly we were faced with these fearsome aeroplanes called Spitfires. And all the training you had was to sit in the hangar with the blindfold round your eyes and the Spitfires on trestles, and you felt around the cockpit trying to identify all the tits and bits, pulling the wheels up and put the flaps down, etc., etc., for half a day, and introduced your aeroplane and to get on with it.
Gives you goosebumps all over, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does me. Quite literally.
I can remember this line-up of Spitfires and thinking, my goodness, that's going to be something.
We walked over to this thing, we looked at it, we stroked it. I fell in love with it. We just had one Spitfire, but then a couple of days later, 15 more turned up, and we were a fighter squadron.
Same compass, though. No, it's split flap underneath the wing.
Underneath the wing, okay.
It's very business-like on the inside. There's not many frills around, not many cushions in the seat either.
It was the latest and fastest thing, and a little bit daunting when somebody said, there's one, you know, go and have a go at it, see how you get on.
It's completely different to a Cessna 150. It's a different ball game altogether. It's a fighter.
There were no pilot's notes in those days. All we were given was a quarto sheet of paper with the climbing speed, stalling speed, cruising speed and cruising revs. That was about it.
To step from a Tiger Moth and step into a Spitfire is huge step. And these people that had to do it in 1940, it's pretty special, big step.
Somebody took you out and showed you, the stick and things like that.
This is the propeller, the RPM.
Our introduction was to a test pilot who just said, well, this is the petrol system.
That's the engine instruments, there's your flying, but it's easy, no trouble at all, that's it.
You had things that went up and down and roundabout, undercarriages that went up, flaps that came down, and all this kind of thing. We're completely unused to them.
Excuse me, would you tell me how to start the thing, You press that button.
And the very best of luck.
The whole plane as a whole is awe-inspiring. I think when you look inside the cockpit, though, it makes you feel maybe nervous, I suppose. Thinking it's reality is I'm going to be flying this thing in a short while, so a little nervous, if anything, really. It should be fun. Very, 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 very excited.
One thing's very striking in reading the accounts of pilots first meetings with this aircraft is that they always use the same analogy. This aircraft, which after all is a very phallic-looking machine, is always female. She's always glamorous, she's always a lady, and she's their girlfriend. And the vast majority of them fall in love with her and make love to her when they fly. And the Spitfire has, to a degree unmatched, I think, by any other aircraft, the power of Eros behind it. These are young men of 18, 20, laden with testosterone. And what do? They transfer all their fantasies to this machine. And it seems to invite them, even to crowds who watch them at air shows today.
Dave is about to take off for his first flight in the Spitfire. But he won't just be a passenger. When the plane is airborne, he will be in full control of this historic aircraft.
Okay.
You'll never believe the feeling to sit in a Spitfire for the first time. Oh, it was never nothing like it.
Okay, we're in.
You're in.
Apart from the Spitfire being a beautiful aircraft to look at, nice and small, and you fitted into it beautifully, it also had a wonderful smell. I love the smell of a Spitfire. Whether it be the oil, the smell from the engine exhaust as well, but I felt at home with it.
So we'll put this on now. I'm going to help you with this.
You've sat in the cockpit a long time, a chap over your shoulder, showing you everything, and saying how things behaved, but you didn't know how it was going to behave until you actually flew it. Quite a moment. Big gulp before you start off. Yes, it is a big moment in one's life.
I'm a lot more relaxed now. The aircraft, after we've walked around the aircraft, you get to know it, you get to know the aircraft more. I'm sure it's going to be completely different when the big Merlin engine swings into action and the noise, but I'm excited now. Yeah, very excited. I just want to get airborne and see how it feels.
I was amazed at the vibration and the terrific din. You've got 1,500 horsepower just 6 feet away from you in front there, and the exhaust pipes are only this long, and they're out here, and they're pointing straight at you. So if it weren't for the cockpit being closed and your mouths over ears and so on, it's almost unbearable. How the airmen cope with it, I don't know.
You get into this thing and you taxi out, and you can't see a thing in front of you because the nose is stuck right up in the air. So you have to keep going from side to side on the way out, then you line up and you open the throttle and the almighty warmth hits you.
Camera's closed.
It's closed. I'm just going to put the main fuel tank on again now.
Okay, knees out the way.
And we are ready to go.
When you open that throttle to take off, it just, compared with the previous aircraft, it just dragged you along at fantastic speed into the air. It was very much like what later flying jet aircraft was like. It was this huge thrust and power.
Bring the RPM back to 2650.
Sensation in getting a Spitfire airborne, even in later years, was always quite a thrill, quite exciting. Never lost it.
So I just bring the boost back, which is the throttle, back to +4, and I'll bring the RPM back to 2400.
The takeoff was something like I'd never experienced before. The acceleration was a little bit awe-inspiring. But once you got it into the air, you obviously had a beautiful aeroplane. and you settle down in it very quickly.
Now what you want to be doing is to look straight ahead and to get the picture that we've got out the front at the moment and fly that picture, okay? The same as you would in any other aeroplane.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give control to you, so you have control.
I have control?
You have control.
Okay.
Okay, just keep that picture out the front.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Just relax. Keep the straight level, that's perfect.
It was totally different than any other aircraft you'd flown. I mean, the handling qualities, and it was a wonderful thrill. You were airborne in a Spitfire.
Okay. No problem. And we'll take this opportunity to climb, so if you climb for me.
Okay.
Just climb it up gently, and then go to the right. That's about enough angle to bank, that's right.
So much more relaxed than I thought it would be.
It's amazingly responsive, isn't it?
It behaved so well the whole time. It had the most wonderful characteristics. I think everybody who's flown Spitfires would agree with that.
You want to turn, you think about it, and you turn. It really is a beautiful thing. It's a musician's aeroplane, you play with it.
It is a wonderful aircraft in the cruise if you're just transiting along from one position to another. And yet it turns into this amazing fighting machine. It turns from a nice, pleasant lady into a really wicked fighter.
As 1939 became 1940, the RAF had the aircraft. What it lacked were enough pilots. The only way to boost numbers fast was slash the training time. During the Battle of Britain, new pilots were reporting for duty with just 9 hours' experience in a Spitfire.
The successful pupil who gets the 9 hours in the Spitfire, by the end of that period of time, apart from the actual doing takeoffs and landings, he will be very close to, hopefully, what a similar hour Battle of Britain pilot may have been.
Do a left-hand turn.
Okay.
Just try and keep the height, which you are. You're doing nicely.
Hey!
Just bring it back again now, and then go to the right. Well, you've got some natural ability there, Dave. I can see why you were chosen.
You're not to tell you the truth to get through, but
yeah,
no complaints if you get to fly a Spitfire.
Dave has completed his first hour's flight in a Spitfire. If this was 1940, he would now have just 8 more hours before he was expected to go and fight for his life.
Why can't all aircraft be Spitfires?
At Duxford, it's RAF trainee John Sweet's turn to take the controls for his first flight in the Spitfire. Back in 1940, pilots would have been on the lookout for enemy fighters from the moment they took off. On the 10th of July 1940, the scale and ferocity of air fighting increased dramatically. It is therefore considered to be day one of the Battle of Britain.
Okay, I'm going to hand over control to you now. You have control.
I have control.
You have.
At the beginning of July, Fighter Command had 754 Hurricanes and Spitfires at their disposal, 2/3 of which were Hurricanes and just 1/3 Spitfires.
The Spitfire has become the kind of emblem of the Battle of Britain, almost the emblem of Britain's war effort. But in 1940, I think we need to think of this as the battle that was won by Hurricanes and Spitfires, and not just by Spitfires.
Well, I've flown both the Hurricane and the Spitfire. The Hurricane was a good aircraft to fight in. I brought one home once when a chap had got on my tail. It looked like a colander. But they were able to repair it. I was back on the line in the squadron within 6 weeks.
It was a better aircraft than the Spitfire in certain respects. It was a better gun platform, and it had the same armament, of course. And it turned more quickly, but it didn't really matter. But it didn't have the agility of a Spitfire.
The speed and manoeuvrability of the Spitfires made them ideal to take on the fighter escorts, while the sturdy Hurricanes took on the bombers.
We found it quite satisfactory to do that, because the bombers used to come across in formation at between 15 and 18,000 feet. And we were sufficiently agile to be able to cope with the bombers quite well. But of course, it was whilst we were attacking the bombers, we used to be clobbered from behind by the escorts, and we couldn't cope with them. We couldn't cope with them.
What they faced was the greatest air armada the world had ever seen. Ranged against them were 1,107 Messerschmitt 109s, the most feared and deadly of the German fighters. On top of this, the Germans had 357 twin-engined Messerschmitt 110 fighters, 1,380 Heinkel, Dornier and Junkers twin-engine bombers, along with 428 deadly Stuka dive bombers ready to throw into battle. The odds of 4-1 ranged against fighter command looked daunting. Little wonder the Germans thought it would be all over in a week.
Okay, level out there.
Okay, I'm going to pull the boost back to a half.
Okay.
And then pull the RPM down to 2,000 a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be fine, yeah. Okay.
Okay, boost coming back.
Yep.
And the RPM coming back.
And that's a classic Spitfire bounce.
Yep.
The second one is okay.
That was fantastic. It was a little bit twitchy to start off with, but once I got the hang of it, it's absolutely wonderful aircraft to fly. It's really nice and smooth, and very responsive to everything you do.
After 15 minutes of flying the Spitfire, it's incredible how at ease I felt with it straight away. It's an aircraft which immediately gave me a lot of trust in it. The behaviour of it is impeccable. It's absolutely superb.
They're both very competent, surprisingly so.
How'd you find that?
John has the advantage of being advanced with the variable pitch propeller, so that was not something he had to take on board. But then you have to bear in mind that Dave had to take it on board and did. So I was pleased with that. They're neck and neck. There's nothing much to choose between them. But there is a definite difference between the RAF and the civilian.
Dave and John's training is as realistic as possible, but there is one activity they won't be undertaking: firing the Spitfire's guns. The Spitfire's elliptical wings didn't just look beautiful, they were lethal too, housing an awesome array of 8 machine guns.
Once Britain had got fighters that were fast enough to actually catch bombers, the problem then was to actually shoot them down, because bombers were becoming increasingly sturdy and they were becoming well armoured. And it was a fairly junior officer, a squadron leader called Ralph Sawley, who set himself the task of solving this problem, and he experimented on old airframes, seeing how many machine guns he needed at what rate of fire to actually wreck them, and came to the conclusion that what was necessary to do fatal damage to a bomber's airframe was the combined power of 8 machine guns.
When one was firing, you turned this knurled ring and pressed the button, and an extraordinary smell of cordite came up into the cockpit, and it had a remarkable sort of lifting effect on your spirits. I don't know why that should be. It was rather like, I imagine, a drug would be in elevating your spirits.
We always assumed, I think, before we've ever fired these 8 guns, that the plane would automatically stop when you did it, but not at all.
16th of August, 1940. Dear Mum and Dad, this evening 6 of us on patrol at 16,000 feet ran into about 50 Jerrys, and I had my baptism of firing. I made 3 attacks, and on the last, I believe, I may have got my man, for he went into a vertical dive and hadn't pulled out by the 10/10th clouds at 6,000 feet. It was terrifically exciting, and I'm darned if I can remember what happened at the time. The others got quite a good haul, I believe, and as I had a cine camera mounted in my aircraft, I'm on my toes waiting for the film to be developed to know if I was aiming anywhere near the fellow. More soon. Love as always, Nigel.
Amazingly, the cine footage from Nigel's plane survives to this day, a shaky, grainy glimpse of one of air combat's decisive moments. These cameras operated only when the gun trigger was pressed, and were intended to confirm the pilot's claims for planes shot down. Of course, all too often, they also record the moment many airmen lost their lives.
I remember thinking, look, why do we have to do this sort of thing, you know? 20th century civilization? Do we really have to do this? Some of the sights you saw. A Heinkel going down with some poor chap who'd bailed out, opened his parachute too early and it got caught up round the tail. And he went straight into the deck, flaying around the back of this. People bailing out and parachutes not opening. One Junkers 88's on fire. Heinkel, you know, frightful. Parachutes all over the place. Some not opening, some... You know, 20th century civilization. Come on, mate, you know.
Killing is something that, to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about. And these fighter pilots, maybe they didn't think about it at first. I'm not sure how they would have dealt with that, but I imagine the anger and the sheer determination to save Britain from invasion would be enough.
I don't think going into combat is something you can really prepare yourself for at all. You can't really think about it too much in advance, I don't think. It's something that is going to be totally different from any expectations you ever have of it. And it's something that everybody deals with in their own ways.
Dave and John are beginning to understand the huge task facing the young battlers. By July 1940, the Luftwaffe were preparing to deliver a massive knockout blow against Britain. Mitchell and Cam had given the RAF the weapons with which to fight. Next time, we find out how the Spitfires were to perform in the face of this Nazi onslaught.
Mitch! They can't take the Spitfires, Mitch. They can't take them.